Welcome back to the first edition. Actually, we can't even say welcome back. This is the first edition of the Man Man Fantasy Baseball Fan. We are coming at you for the second time this evening. We just recorded the Man Man Badgers Fan. But we had a big weekend from. We drafted our annual fantasy baseball teams. This league has been going since 2007. And I think the majority of the league has been in it like most of that time, which is pretty awesome.
Yep.
So we had our draft this weekend. We want to kind of just share out our team, share our strategies, what we know. Maybe we can give you some advice for your leagues coming up. Let's start here, Froemm. So we drafted March 1st, which is probably the earliest we've ever drafted.
Agreed.
How do you feel about that? And two, how did that alter your strategy from years past?
Right. So spring training runs, pretty deep into March there. And just there's so many things in baseball that can happen with injuries and guys getting optioned, and who's going to make the rotation, who's going to make the starting lineup, etc. So there is a lot up in the air with baseball. I'd say much more than other sports. So many variables to consider. There's free agents still out there. There's a lot of still really good free agents to be signed. I was looking at like a guy like Craig Kimbrell. Like, where is he going to end up right now? So, it definitely makes you think of maybe the best case scenario of like if this guy should progress through spring or make the team. I think it makes you look at it that way versus having more data, having more information, and being like, I know this guy is likely going to not make the team, or he's going to be optioned down and not start the year with the team. And so maybe I'm not going to draft him, or I'm going to wait and pick him up on wires later. So things like that. And I just think there's always injury concerns. Some of these guys just have histories of a lot of injuries. And I think with the phenomenon in baseball we've seen with all the Tommy John and just, guys not being able to stay on the field, et cetera, even great position players, in the field, having season-ending injuries. So I think there's just a lot more risk when you draft early and not knowing things. So I think it makes you question, I think, the moves you make and the picks you take.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknown, which I actually think is a unique opportunity. Like you said, you could probably get some values on players. You might also reach on players, especially the young guys. You haven't really seen a lot in spring training yet. So it's like you are gambling on what you know, what you read, just kind of like what your gut feelings are. Traditionally, we've drafted middle of March, usually around like the second weekend of March Madness. So at that point, you pretty much know who's going to make the team, who's going to start. I'll say personally, like figuring out pitching, like bullpens and like late rotations, were tricky this time of year. But like I said, we might look back and be like, dang, some really good values for guys picking, just because you did take a chance on a guy and he did say make the rotation. So yeah, I think I actually kind of like drafting early. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know how I would enjoy it. I want to talk about this league a little bit because it's a little unique. This isn't your typical, we just redraft everybody every year. The way this league runs is you have to keep 3 players a year, but you can't keep a player more than 2 consecutive seasons. So if I draft a player this year, I can keep them next year and I can keep them the year after. If that's the case, they go back into the free agent pool. So you'll notice with keepers, there's some like really high end guys, like Shohei Ohtani was a keeper. But then you'll see when we get into the draft results, players like Gunnar Henderson and Juan Soto and Aaron Judge were free agents because they've been kept so long. So that's one component. Every team starts with 3 keepers. The other thing that I think makes our league a little unique is that we have some sort of different categories, I would say, than your typical league. So we have batting average, hits, home runs, RBIs, stolen bases. I think those are pretty standard, and OPS. But the one we added recently was walks divided by strikeouts. So basically, if I walk 2 times and strike out 1, my walks to strikeouts would be 2. And I think I don't. You kind of aim for like a 0.7, 0.8, I feel like would be a nice number for that. But it really helps sort of balance out those players that only hit for power and the players that get on base elsewhere. Um, and before we get to pitching, is there anything with those hitting categories that you like or don't like, or just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to ponder when you look through those stats. I know we've tweaked them as we go, but yeah, I think the league in itself, right, has turned into this, bombs away, can we hit for power, launch angle league. And so I like you said, that we do make people, look at average, look at just if you're going to strike out all the time. I think we make, league owners look at that stuff, and you can find guys that get a bunch of hits, hit for average, steal bases, etc. So I like the balance there, because the league definitely has leaned towards this power hitting league the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, and we've done a good job in this league. So one thing is we've always balanced pitching with hitting. So we always have the exact same amount of pitching categories as we do hitting to try to balance some of that out. But I just want to talk about quick our pitching categories, because this is where it gets, I think, pretty unique. Is we do walks plus hits hit by pitch, ERA, innings pitched, just as its own standalone category, strikeouts. We do losses plus blown saves as its own category. We do saves and holds together because the way the relieving game has changed in MLB. There's a lot of leverage relievers, and sometimes the best relievers on teams pitching the seventh and eighth inning. We do wins plus quality starts, and then we do whip. So this is these changes have come probably in the last 5 years, a lot of them, but it's in an effort to keep up with the game that's evolving. And I don't know, just from my perspective, I think we've landed on really strong categories, and it makes you have a pretty diverse pitching staff. I don't know if you have any takes on that as well before we go to the draft.
Yeah, I think you and I represent the spectrum, in the league of I go heavy starters, you go heavy relievers, and I've broken down these categories. And it's pretty fascinating because it kind of goes by like one category or so, and you break it down, right? It's what, 9 categories in each, right? 9 for hitting, 9
9 and 8 chip.
for pitching, and so it kind of goes like 5-4 either way when I broken down, in my head throughout the year. And I'm like, if I go really heavy reliever, if I go really heavy starter, which is pretty awesome. Because I mean, even if you're, I try to get as many innings as possible. You get all the Ks, but then you're sacrificing losses. Maybe guys get blown up, then you have a really high ERA, high WHIP, etc. So it's pretty awesome, and how you can have, like you said, you can have these really different rosters, but be really competitive against each other.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite part is there's a lot of varying strategies. So when we get into the draft here, I think we'll kind of explain what we did, um, and give you some history of what has helped propel teams to victory. Because I think we've both been pretty successful over the years, building teams completely different ways, which I would say I love fantasy baseball way more than I love fantasy football, because I think there's way more, the owner has more control over things that happen, especially over the course of a long season. So let's go into the draft. Let's start with our keepers. Froemm, do you have your keepers offhand? Like, what did you start with for your team?
Yep. So I was all pitching. I didn't love it, but it was all starters. Top 10 starters going into the year, with Tarek Skubal, I think, was considered the best overall starter going into this season after a Cy Young year last year. Then Chris Sale, once again, a Cy Young winner as well from last year. And then I had Mr. Cole Reagans. Is Cole his first name? I think Cole's his first name.
Yeah.
I just
Ronald.
remember Reagans.
Yeah.
I remember guys' first names. I don't know about you. But I actually traded Mr. Reagans with our buddy Phil on our podcast group here, the Man family. And I got Wyatt Langford, somebody you chased after him last year in the draft, and maybe kind of reached on him. And he definitely had a rough start, but came on late. I think you traded him to Phil. Is that how that went last year?
I did. I sold low.
Yep, sold low on him, and he bounced back to your dismay. And then I was able to trade for him this year because I traded all 3 first-round picks. So another cool component of our league is you can trade draft picks. And at least in baseball, it works. We found out in fantasy football that formula doesn't work so well. But at least in fantasy baseball, it's a pretty good deal. And but not having your first 3-round first-round picks like you've had, Chris, yeah, it puts you in a bind. And so I needed an offensive player, and getting Wyatt Langford was pretty huge to start the season.
Yeah, that trade was awesome. So we have this bet in our league chat of would there be a pre-draft trade? So appreciate Phil and Frem coming through. There's also a blockbuster that happened like 30 seconds after the trade started, which shocked the
Do you,
league.
do you want to just
Uh,
call that out? I think it is a fascinating trade for those baseball fans. I have it pulled up here. Do you
okay,
have
if
it?
you have it, yeah, read it off, please.
Yeah, so it's between our league mates here, Justin Parker and Eric Lackey. And it was I think Lackey put in the chat here was what 201. So technically, as the draft is starting, he
Yeah,
made this
Lackey was on the clock when he made this trade. Felt like the
huge.
real NFL draft here.
Yeah. So Lackey gets in return, and this is the players with the picks because I think there was a third and fourth here. From what Lackey got is Jose Ramirez, Zach Wheeler, Edwin Diaz, and Mason Miller. That's so what the players he drafted, I believe. Yeah, I don't remember if were Diaz and Miller the ones he drafted. I don't totally remember.
Yeah. Yep.
So and then Gunnar Henderson is what Parker gets back with Seiya Suzuki, Shota Imanaga, and Bryce Miller, as I butcher their names. But I thought that was just a fascinating flip of Gunnar Henderson was the overall number one pick by Parker there, which he gets from Lackey. But I have to hand it to Lackey. I don't want to, I'll put down Parker too much, but I think Lackey got definitely the better hand here in this trade, and I don't know. I give them both credit because it's such a bold move on both ends to make that move and what goes into that, and then the long term effect here.
Yeah, so just context, Jose Ramirez and Zach Wheeler cannot be kept. Like this is the last year they can be kept. And Lackey had 3 first-round picks heading into the draft. So basically he's just like, you know what, I'm going to stockpile talent on my team. So he gets Wheeler and he gets Ramirez, which are two like top 25 overall players. And Parker, I'm assuming his stance here is like he's playing from behind to begin with because he won the league last year, traded some early picks. So his thought is, I want Gunnar Henderson at pick 1. I know I can keep Gunnar Henderson for this year plus 2 more. And also, I have Bobby Witt for this year and next year still too. So like he's building a core of Witt and Henderson for the future. And Parker's a good enough owner where I feel like he can kind of figure it out as the year goes on.
Yeah,
But he definitely, like, on the surface, did not win the trade.
yeah.
So I like that Lackey's going for it, and I hope that he doesn't trade his entire team for the Chicago Cubs roster throughout the year because
Hope he
he
hears
did
that.
set himself up really well. Okay, so my keepers, just for context, going into the draft, Trey Turner, Kyle Tucker, and Michael Harris. I traditionally only keep hitters, just kind of the way I operate. I like that we're doing this podcast together because you challenge my thinking the other way a little bit. Okay, so we get to the first round. Frem, you did not have a first round pick. You
No.
traded it, going to win the league last year. I ended up with pick 6, which to me, for those of you that can see the draft screen, the first 6 picks were Gunnar Henderson, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis, Corbin Carroll, and I took Julio Rodriguez. To me, there was a clear top 6. I was happy with any of them. Julio is the one that fell to me, so I felt pretty good about that. The rest of the first round, Ketel Marte, Austin Riley, Jaron Duran, Matt Olson, Manny Machado, William Contreras. So as you can see, like when you throw the keepers in, that back half of the first round doesn't look as exciting as maybe your hometown first rounds look. So as we go to the second round, I had the first pick in the second round. I traded for one last year. My team just wasn't that good. I ended up taking George Kirby, which I don't traditionally take pitchers high, but I felt like I needed one really good pitcher to anchor my staff. I like Kirby, so I took him with the first pick in round 2. And then with my second pick in round 2, I cannot help myself with taking young upside players. I took Junior Caminero for the Rays with pick 8 in the second round. I'm hoping he can be my keeper for 2 more years.
Yep.
Like I think very highly of him. It's probably a reach from all context of ADP, but I wanted a player that could help anchor my team moving forward. So I went with Caminero. Frem, did you have? It doesn't look like you had a second round pick either,
No,
did you?
I was going to ask you though, if you had to redo round two, because I totally agree with you when you look through that first round, those guys, the next six that come after uh, J Rod there. But that second round to me is really interesting of those guys that get drafted in between your picks of, Devin Williams, Pete Alonso, Azuna, Altuve, Wood, Cease. I'm just curious, even guys like Class A, Schwarber, Abrams, Snell, like, are there any of those guys taking a look now, like just a second look and reflecting hindsight's always 2020, that you would maybe redo a pick there? Because there's some really good
Yeah,
talent in there of these like kind of these like near elite, near top tier guys.
right. So the one thing, so I was actually George Kirby was a stress pick for me because I was planning on taking William Contreras with
Okay.
the first pick in the second round, and then Ryan took him the pick before. But I was okay with Kirby. I have no regrets on that. My only wondering is kind of what you're hinting at, I think, is could Caminero make it to the third round for me? Because he
Yeah.
might have. I don't know. I was just a little worried that someone else wanted him. My guy that I would have definitely taken, though, is Class A. To get that real, like probably the best reliever on the board in round two, I think would have been a nice value. I wasn't really targeting any of those bats.
Interesting.
CJ Abrams was sort of on my mind, but
Yeah.
also like he got sent down at the end of last year, and I
Oh, I
just
know.
just
I
kind of wonder like what's I think he's going to be fine, but I just had enough hesitation based on that.
yeah, I owned him last year, and I traded him then to you, and he fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah,
But
it's
James
fine.
Wood, we had such banter about it last year when I just dropped him, and I got a lot of pushback from you and Phil. And I thought that was interesting. He gets drafted really high there in the second round. I was curious. A guy like James Wood, you like
Yeah,
that young talent. Yeah,
I like James Wood, but I do think he's going to struggle this year. Like
right.
I think maybe as the year goes on he'll get better, but he's going to have to adjust to major league pitching now that they know who he is. The
Oh,
data's out on
absolutely.
him. So
Yeah.
I struggled wanting to take him in the second round because he's a polarizing player. He can do it all. Uh, but I do think he's going to go through some pretty big slumps, especially early on in the year. But I think ceiling wise, yeah, he's could be the real deal. Moving on to the third round, Frem, you did not have a third round pick either. Yeah, you
No,
started
did
off
not.
like I usually do. That's amazing. Third round, this is the pick I will question my entire the entire season as I took Adley Rutschman, who I'm notoriously low on. But I just like that Baltimore team. I like that he's going to hit in the top half of the order. And truthfully, this was the part of the draft where it really started to separate. We talk a lot in baseball about um, you kind of just take your guys. It's not really about where they go. You just have to take guys that you think are going to do well, as opposed to worrying about where you think they're going to get drafted. But this was the point of the draft in round three where I was like, man, I probably should have taken another pitcher.
Mhm.
Because this is by not taking one in round three, another starter. I feel like I set my team pretty far back in terms of being able to get legit starting pitchers because they were there and available. I sort of panicked because the catching position is rough this year.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I don't get any of the top two or three, like I'm just gonna wait till the last round. So Rutschman was still there. I decided, he's only 27. He's on, like I said, one of the best offenses in baseball. I'm hoping he can bounce back and have a better season. I don't know. I'm just curious. Like, do you have any opinions on Rutschman?
I think it's just without going into the weeds of just like is Rutschman like how good of a hitter he is. I just look at that position of catcher, and I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum of just not valuing the position. I treat it like a kicker in fantasy football. I
Yeah.
just will stream that position forever and ever and ever. And this is after the history of taking a guy like Gary Sanchez back in the day when he came up and he was really hot as a prospect. And I believe they even kept him. And after that experience, I think I've just always been like, you know what, catcher is not that important. Uh, there's a lot of quality catchers that kind of come and go. Those rankings just keep shifting up and down throughout the year, and even your one or two guy may not even be that good when it's all said and done. So I just will not. I refuse to spend the draft capital on that position. I think that's where
Yeah.
my philosophy is on that. So
And I've traditionally kind of been the same. So that's why I surprised myself by taking him. Like I said, to me, that's going to be the pick I look back on either as okay, I did okay, or man, I really messed that up. Okay, round 4, Brian, welcome to the draft. You have pick 3 in round 4 and take Cody Bellinger. I
Yep.
don't know. Curious what your thought process is there.
So I think he's like my fantasy clone, Garrick Holly. Whenever I mean, we play fantasy baseball with this guy for many years now, and he's drafting guys just like me. So Michael King was a guy I had last year. Definitely would have taken him if he would have fell there. But uh, like I said, I went into the season with two top tier pitchers, and so really need a bat. Really need somebody just to kind of center the lineup. A guy like Luis Robert, injury concerns, needs to get traded off the White Sox. I would love to have a guy like him, but just don't trust right there. So went with kind of a true and tried guy with Cody Bellinger. Somebody in a new team. I was thinking of a left-handed batter in New York on the short porch, and just hoping that he hits enough bombs and can make enough noise in that lineup there. But I was just looking for somebody safe at that pick because I didn't have a lot of picks before that, so I need to kind of catch up here and just looking for somebody safe. Didn't want to try to reach on anyone.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart advice. Playing from behind, not having a top 3 round pick, playing it safe, and just getting guys you know are going to produce actually is a really smart strategy because you can always trade your way back up to being good. Like you can trade 3 picks a year.
Yes,
So if you hit on those safe guys, you can then trade for more of those like high upside guys later. Round 4, I took Vinny Pasquantino, first baseman for the Royals. I really like him. I think he's like his best is yet to come. And the Royals continue to get better offensively. He'll hit probably third or fourth. So I have high expectations for him. I did take him over some big names, right? Like Brian Reynolds went after that, Jordan Westberg, Bryce Miller. So I feel like I took a little bit of a chance, but first baseman's also kind of weak in fantasy this year too. Round 5, I took Royce Lewis. I really like him to bounce back with the caveat of him staying healthy because his talent is immense, uh, but he's just never been able to stay on the field. Froemm, you took Bo Bichette. I just saw a video of him hitting a home run today, and I'm like, man, he's not dead yet.
no,
I'm curious where you stand.
No, he's not. And I was rapidly doing some research right before this pick and just seeing how he had so many injuries, just a down season, 81 games last year, and how people really lost so much faith in Bo. But, talk about getting a star on the cheap. I thought that was my opportunity to go get Bo. Adames, I went back and forth with him. Even guys like Trout, Yelich to get picked right after him. I'm like, but I just looked at injuries and some of these guys not being the same. And Adames, I'm looking going to a pitcher's park. That's not a hitter park um, out in San Francisco there. So definitely going with upside there. Bo is still young, mid 20s, and so I'm like, I think this guy can have a good bounce back here, and definitely get him on the cheap there. And I think strategy wise, I was looking at I need somebody to anchor in this infield. You'll see later on, I kind of just like kind of punt a little bit on second and third base and have some guys I can fill in and upside guys there, but I needed somebody to anchor the infield because I really didn't have a lot going there. So I went with Bo as hopefully what that will be.
Yeah, it's a sneaky pick, and like who knows? Maybe he gets traded this year. I think he's playing for a contract either this year or next year. So like he does need to play better if he wants to sort of like continue his career on being looked at as a top 10 shortstop. So I do like that pick in round 5. We're not going to go through every round. We'll probably or not give analysis of every round, but
Yep.
pick round 6 is my most fascinating when I look at your pick and I look at my pick. So round 6, pick 3, you take Spencer Schwellenbach, who people who stuck it out in fantasy baseball last year. That's a name you probably recognize as like, where did this guy come from? And by the way, he's also really, really good. Sort of like Spencer Strider was a few years ago, sort of out of nowhere. Um, Tell me about Spencer Schwellenbach.
Yeah, ranks at least top 30, maybe even top 25 or top 20 in the league. He has some really good action, two seamer, etc. Just shows some really good stuff up in the zone. I've had a chance to watch him a little bit last year. Just some electric pitches and great movement. And I think the big thing is he can pitch deep into games. He's consistent, and he definitely gets great strikeout ratios. So also believing in the system he pitches in. I think that's another layer of it. If you pay attention to who grooms these pitchers or who brings them up, and the Braves have definitely been able to do that as of late. And so believing in what Schwellenbach's doing there in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think he's the real deal. And I actually haven't read a lot of things that think he's going to fall off. Like this, yeah, it reminds me of Spencer Strider. I guess that is almost like the perfect comp in terms
Yep.
of coming out of nowhere, but also not a fluke. Round 6, I took a polarizing player too. I took Dylan Cruz, outfielder for the Nationals. I'm really hoping that he makes the team and wins a starting spot because Dylan Cruz, I would say, is a top probably 2 or 3 prospect in
Yes.
baseball.
Absolutely.
And his ability is like his upside's like a 25 or 2020 player, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm banking on him maybe not having a great season, but good enough to where I can put him in keeper consideration for next year. But also, some of these guys come in and do really well right away. Like we talked about Wyatt Langford, he struggled out of the gate. And that may happen with Cruz, but I do like banking on guys with immense talent and just hoping that they figure it out early. So yeah, I think it was a little bit of a reach, but sometimes you just got to take the guys you want to. Round
Absolutely.
7, I took a bounce back reliever, Felix Bautista. He was out all of last year. I'm feeling pretty confident that he will come back to his form and be a top 5 reliever in baseball. You took Andres Munoz, also a pretty high end reliever when healthy. So we both took sort of injured closers traditionally, but guys that have proven they can be. They either one of those could be the number 1 reliever in fantasy.
Oh, absolutely.
Round 8, you took Brian Wu, a young pitcher for the Mariners, who had some really nice numbers last year. Another guy that needs to avoid the injury bug. And I did the same again. I took an injured pitcher, Sandy Alcantara, missed most of last year, but he was throwing 99 in spring training the other day. And so, like, when I saw that, I was like,
Oh my
man,
gosh.
the Marlins are bad, but Sandy Alcantara is still really good. So I'm hoping that he can get close to anywhere over 150 innings for me as a win for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on to round 9, I took Cade Smith. So this is where the holds come in. It's like, I don't care about your saves. Give me holds. Cade Smith's a guy I owned last year. Really liked him. Low ERA. Gets a lot of holds. Plays on Cleveland. So I do think he's going to rack up some holds.
So
You took Spencer Steer. Oh, yeah. You got something?
I was just gonna say this is the start of your strategy right now. So I know you don't just break this down. Like some people are looking at you like this is one category, Chris. Like why are you taking holds in the 9th round?
Yeah, so the reason I take holds is because I view all relievers as basically equal, kind of like I talked about earlier. I don't care if you're a 7th, 8th, or 9th inning guy. To me, if you are a good reliever, you have a low ERA, you have a low whip, you have high strikeouts, and you get holds, which are the same as saves in our league. So basically, half of the pitching categories, you can bring your ratios way down with someone that's dominant. So that's why, to me, I don't care if you're a closer or not. I just want a guy that doesn't walk players, that traditionally gets more than 1 strikeout an inning, and keeps the ERA under 3. And that's been my strategy for a long time in this league, and seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's just pretty fascinating. I mean, we have what 25 rounds here, and you're starting that already in the 9th round. And I think
Yeah.
we were chatting a little bit before this with Phil. Just yeah, your strategy is starting it there, and I think you put a lot of pressure on a lot of other league mates because a lot of us are starting to be like, okay, whoa, like we thought maybe we could wait, whatever, 15th round on or so, but you're starting this already in the 9th. I think made a lot of people start to think about, okay, I gotta keep my eye on relievers and like where they're going.
Yeah, and in context, like if you're looking at on Spotify on the video, like CBS says that Cade Smith is the 532nd overall player. And if you look at most of the other players in the round, like that doesn't make sense. We're in the 100s. But
Yep,
they don't really like take into account our league settings. So
correct.
it is interesting, but I agree with you. Like 2 picks later, Griffin Jacks went, who's also a holds guy. So
Yep,
yeah, it definitely could have started the run. You
for
took
sure.
Spencer Steer. I do want to ask you about this one because To me, he's an interesting player. I never like I don't know what his ceiling is, but I'm curious like what intrigues what do you like about him? Obviously, he's in a good ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, this is one of those picks I may regret, and now I'm looking at like, okay, he may be on the IL coming into the season, but uh, yeah, it was looking for power, looking for home runs. I will say the ninth and tenth rounds were rounds where I just feel like I got caught in a weird, uh, you know, dead zone, dead spot, so to speak, where I didn't see a lot of guys I loved. I didn't feel like reaching for somebody here. Was trying to find value of somebody who would be drafted in somewhere around this range. But looking back, I would probably redo these picks in the ninth and 10th round. Spencer Steer, there's some power there. There's some potential there. I think he's underperformed. He's only 27. Looking at some of his growth there in his career and hoping for more from him. And I really tried to look at the upside there of what could be with Spencer Steer. But once again, like I said, I think this is a pick that I could probably go back and redo if I could. It wasn't a pick I was in love with.
Yeah. So we'll look at round 10, and then from there we'll kind of just talk about players we liked after that. So round 10, you took Adolis Garcia. Just looking at the data here, it shows that you made that pick in 1 minute and 58 seconds. So I'm
Oh
assuming
yeah,
that was like a last second decision. I mean, he did have a down year last year. Obviously, has a lot of power. Like I would think he's probably going to regress positively this year.
yeah,
And if that's the case, I feel like that's good value. I don't know if you have anything else to add on him.
yeah. It's one of those ones where it's like if you have nothing else, you're just going to go back to a guy that at least. Yeah, I mean, this is maybe an area I would have gone to like an AJ Puck kind of go to a reliever here. Yeah, hard to say though. I think Phil and I were joking. You forget about guys like a Jackson Holiday. Maybe this is where I would have tried to go after a guy like him and seek potential. But yeah, it is one of those things of you're in, compare that to fantasy football where you have maybe what like 14, 15 rounds, etc. You're going 25 rounds, and you get in some of these rounds where you're just like, huh, not sure, because you don't
Yeah.
see things coming. You don't know how the draft's gonna unfold for you.
Well, in baseball, there's just so many players you have to know, and it is hard to keep track of it. Even as people that love baseball and watch a lot,
Yep.
like there are still players that sneak by us. And I look at this round. This is a perfect example. You talk about Jackson Holiday. Garrick takes him. Like Jackson Holiday could be a top 3 round pick next year. And then the last two picks of that round, Ezekiel Tovar and Zach Neto, both are really good shortstops and could easily outperform their ADP. And so, like, that's what I love about baseball is any round you can find someone uh, that could be a star for you. Okay, so after round 10, let's just talk about some players that you took that you liked. I'm going to pull up your team here. I'm sure you have it up on your screen too. Sorry, this is bad radio here while I do this quick.
Yeah, I can fill it in. I mean, so after round 10, I really liked how he bounced back to round 11, getting a guy like that I followed for most of his career in Shane Baz. Drafting a Cubby in Matt Shaw, which I'm sure you can tell me much more about Matt Shaw than I can as a non-Cubs fan here. But loving the upside there at third base. 12th round, going with Tim Truan. Tried guys there with Castellanos and Yu Darvish. And so I really like how I recovered. I was able to get guys like Edmund later, Kauser later. So really finding value all over the place. Luzardo, that ninth and 10th round really had me bummed. But after that, I really like how that transitioned for me and getting a lot of guys that I wanted later on. Being able to steal some guys, I think I was able to, find Young Ho Lee, getting him away from our friend BK. Got a guy like Walker Bueller, 17th round. So Scherzer, finding some really, just interesting picks later on, some lottery picks later on. I was really happy with how I bounced back and how that developed. How about you for the last 15 rounds or so there?
Yeah, I'll pull mine up in a second. I just want to say, yeah, Jung Hoo Lee, I like a lot. I actually was targeting him, and then when he came off, but I waited too long. I was like, yeah, I'm going to take him. And I'm like, no, I'll wait another round. And
Yep.
eventually he went, and I'm like, shoot, I should have just done it. I also like that you took Walker Bueller round 17. I've already offered you a trade for him. Like I think he could be a nice bounce back candidate. Liam Hendricks in round 20 is we're probably going to look back and think like, what were we doing there? And then you took a shot on a guy like Kristen Campbell. So yeah, I mean, I think you did well of balancing veterans and youth, which is not always my strength. Sometimes I just go too all in on youth and forget that you need to balance out the roster.
Well, and just
Um, yeah, go for it.
one quick shout out is you have to think about what lineups these guys play in. So, right, I highlighted earlier Cody Bellinger, our league mate. Ryan is, a huge Yankees fan. He already knows they're stacked. But the Dodgers, right? I get guys like Tommy Edman. I get guys like Max Muncy because they hit in the Dodger lineup. If they played for Colorado or the White Sox, they would not be a very attractive players. But because they play in these lineups, whether it's, Edmonds still in bases go up or the run totals or the hit totals go up. But they play in such good lineups. They see such good pitches. They move them all over the field and play them at different positions. So I think that's the other piece you have to consider is what lineup are
Right.
your guys playing in and finding value in that. And so, I mean, even like I use the example like a Muncy, I was able to get him in a round 23 or something like that. And it is tricky. Some of these guys, you don't know if they're going to platoon or how they're going to manage some of these stacked rosters. But, when you see a group like the Dodgers, they seem to plug guys in and get enough at bats. And so I think that's just something unique about baseball is what lineup do you hit in? Because let's be real, Chris, if we go through this draft, I mean, find me how many White Sox hitters were drafted or how many Colorado Rocky hitters were drafted, right? Not many. Pittsburgh Pirate hitters not drafted. So I think it's just interesting to look at what teams are drafting as well.
Yeah, I think this league continues to get smarter. There's some really good fantasy baseball minds. And like I was telling you guys before we started this podcast to you and Phil, like there's like the waiver wire is pretty picked over, and that's not always the case post draft. A lot of times it's like, oh, why wasn't that guy drafted? But I don't see many of those out there. For me, round 11, I took Sonny Gray, which I needed a third starter at that point, and I actually really like him as a third starter. From there, I kind of got caught though. Like after those three, I got really stuck with starters. So what I did is I just doubled down on Holds guys. So I took Jeremiah Estrada and Orion Kirkering from San Diego and Philly. They're on good teams. They're both young, like power arms. So I'm hoping those guys sort of elevate my relievers. And then I just kind of took chances on guys. I did take a lot of youth towards the end of the draft. Bryson Stott ended up being my starting second baseman, who I owned last year, sort of fell off the second half of the season. But then I followed him up with Rafaela for Boston, who he's an interesting player. Like a
So
lot of people
interesting.
are calling him like a second year bust. But man, I just like his multi position eligibility.
Oh
And
yeah,
I love that Boston lineup this year. I think
I
Boston's gonna be
know.
really good, as a side note. Uh, I guess just some other notable picks. I took Grant Holmes for Atlanta. He's probably going to win the fifth spot in the rotation and is throwing really hard this spring. So this is sort of an interesting name. I did take Roman Anthony. We can put one guy in the minors, and he's sort of a high end prospect that I hope to wait on, see what happens. And then my last sort of notable pick, round 24, so second to last round, I took Dustin May for the Dodgers and just hoping that he can somehow crack that rotation because his stuff is legit. I just like what you messaged me today. I fear that he's going to be a long reliever and I end up cutting him maybe a
Yep.
week or two in. But if he's not and he makes that rotation, I think that could be a really good value.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, you dominated when it came to relievers. I mean, even getting guys like Tyler Holton later there. I think Nick Pivetta is a very good pitcher. I know people may be down on him, but he's going to a great pitcher's park. He has very high K ratios. So, I mean, he's not always going to pitch the most innings in a game, but I mean, he may give you 10 strikeouts and go 4 innings. So, I think you did pretty well rounding out there and being able to manage, finding those upside guys, finding some guys who could break out offensively, and then also staying true to your strategy, which is what you had. Is I'm going to double down, have relievers, and have a really strong, staff here in terms of relievers.
Yeah, I'm not someone that likes to like do the same thing year after year, but I've just found consistency with taking high-end relievers. And there's also like there's something to be said about finding relievers in season two. You can easily do that. It's harder to find hitters and starters during the season. So my hope is that like I have a nice core of relievers that can kind of carry me and then pick one or two up as the year goes on too. Last thing before we go, I pulled up your team here. Let's just kind of talk through how you feel about your offense and your pitching. Your offense, I mean, obviously on paper, does not look that scary. What is your strategy kind of as the year goes on here? Like, what are you hoping to do with this offense?
Right. So it's really going to be contingent on probably a few players here. I'm going to need Wyatt Langford to be the Wyatt Langford he was at the back half of last year. I'm going to need Bo Bichette to, be the Bo Bichette I think people believe he can be. And then obviously going to need some production out of Cody Bellinger there. Second and third base, like I said, I punted on. So those are going to be positions that I have some upside guys like I believe it's Campbell and then Shaw. I'm hoping that they can make the roster there, and I'm hoping that they can, maybe be the guys that end up being, the starters there. So that's going to be something I'm going to have to play with, though. And then really leaning heavily early in the year on that starting pitching staff. So I believe I only have 4 relievers on my whole staff there. So really leaning heavily on that starting rotation of, I think it's about like 8 or 9 or 10 guys or so, something like that. So really hoping that they can hold it down, hoping to get some early season success out of the studs, guys like Scooble, guys like Sale, Schwellenbach, Wu, Baz. I'm hoping those guys come out and pitch well early in the year, because it is hard when you dig yourself a hole in fantasy baseball. Like, yes, there's so many categories you can bounce back, but it's really nice to come out of, say, April and May and be, top half the league. So really hoping the starting pitching goes well for me. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to be looking at streaming hitters. I think that's just a reality. I have guys there that, whether it's Steer already is going to start off the year injured, etc. I think I'm going to be streaming some hitters early, looking for guys getting hot early in the season.
Yeah, and you can do that. I say it's hard to find hitters,
It
but
is,
also
yeah,
like streaming makes sense with hitting because you can play matchups. Some guys are better against lefties or righties or on the road or at
yeah,
home. Like you can figure some of that out as the year goes on and piece it together. Um, Frem won with starting pitching last year. I mean, that was sort of like your anchor,
it
and you just
was.
rolled
Yep,
it back. Sale, Skubal, Lazardo, Schwellenbach, Wu, Darvish, Baz, even guys like I said, Walker Bueller, Max Scherzer, if he can give you anything. I mean, you double down on starting pitching, and I think worst case scenario, if you need to trade from a position of strength, like you could do that
yep.
to fill in some holes later. So I mean, your pitching is insane. I compare that to mine, and like I said, you might have found a strategy that really works. I know Phil adopted that strategy this year too because of what you did last year. So I'm curious, like if you can piece this offense together, you will. I think you'll definitely be a playoff team.
Yeah, that's the hope. I think the starting pitching formula works, as long as your guys don't get. I mean, it is interesting one where you can afford like, one guy to get, blown up, so to speak, here or there. And then if you have enough guys pitching well, it kind of works its way out, and you do have the high innings and Ks, you get more wins, etc. So uh, it's worked so far. I definitely do a lot of research on pitching, looking at where guys are. And I really tried to balance it with, the guys that are elite, the guys that could be elite, some guys that have been around, some veterans like you listed off, Scherzer, Darvish, and Bueller, hoping that they can bounce back, or at least I can squeeze something out of them for the season.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch. And I know you'll be making your 6 moves a week, so I'm not concerned. With my team, I mean, I'm really banking on. I went all in on offense. I mean, that was kind of my thought going in was offense and relievers. So I do feel really good. I mean, I got Rutschman, Pasquantino, Caminero, Turner, Michael Harris, Julio, Kyle Tucker. If Royce Lewis feels like the guy, like if
Mm.
he can play most of this season, I have a lot of confidence that my offense can produce. And then again, finding a guy or two on the waiver wire. So I'm definitely all in on offense. I feel pretty good at every position, minus second base with Stott and Rafaela. So I'll probably have to play the wire a little bit with that. I drafted Colt Keith late. I don't know if I really expected much from him. Probably end up cutting him soon, but
Real quick, as a
um,
Cubs fan, what do you expect from Kyle Tucker this year? I mean, he's obviously anchoring your fantasy lineup, but just curious what you expect from him as a Cubs fan and as a fantasy owner.
I think he could be a 25-25 player.
Right?
Um, and I'll hold my judgments on the Cubs, but I don't think they're going to come to an agreement with him. I think he's having a good year and he's going to make a ton of money in free agency next year.
Yeah. Well said.
The only thing is like April games in Wrigley are not great with the
Hmm.
weather, so I just hope he can get off to a decent start because he is someone, if he stays healthy, is a top probably 10 player in baseball.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then finally, we talked about my relievers. That's going to anchor my team. My really only three starters are Sandy Alcantara, Sonny Gray, and George Kirby. Like those only guys I can kind of trust on. You hit on Pavetta. I do think Pavetta will give me innings, uh, but I'm really banking on these relievers being solid. Some other guys I didn't talk about: Justin Slayton for Boston, like him a lot. And then I also picked up Garrett Whitlock yesterday after the draft as a holds guy. Um, so I kind of like those guys. I did pick up Tobias Myers after the draft yesterday too. I know Brewers fans will know that name. I have no idea what to expect from him, but his numbers were decent last year. I'm just gonna have to figure this out and be on the waiver wire early for starting pitching. And if I can figure that out, I think I can be a playoff team too.
Yeah. I don't know if I
Um,
want to share too many secrets of mine, but I definitely think there's starters on the waiver wire that you could go after, swap even some of those guys out. Personally, I would probably swap a few guys out that I see on that roster. So I
yeah,
think there's definitely potential for you to play with that. And in all honesty, for you, Chris, I think there's a lot of fun to be had for your pitching staff because you have the relievers on lock, right? You drafted really solid relievers, and I think you're positioned extremely well in that situation. I think actually be pretty fun to see you just explore and maybe experiment and stream some guys and see who gets hot. I mean, there's so many guys that are in that, fifth spot, maybe they're going to be optioned, maybe they're going to make the rotation and whatnot. And so I think it's a fun place to be in some regards because your offense is so strong. Um, yeah, I think pitching will be kind of interesting to see you play with. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really important to reflect on sometimes who your keepers are, and you have such a stronghold with your offense there. And I mean, in context, I know you question that Adley pick, but gosh, that lineup looks amazing with Adley in there, and you get Pasquantino in there, and then you're adding J Rod, Michael Harris. I mean, that is a force to be reckoned with if they all can perform.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I guess some favorites going in. Lackey, obviously, we talked about his trade. Um, I think is like a post draft favorite. But Lackey, if you're listening, you gotta be careful with those Cubs players. I know I said that earlier, but you don't need all the Cubs. But they're just like I said, we have great owners in this league. Obviously, Justin Parker, Garrett Colley, the cousin, Eric Kristoviak, Matt Smith, Phil, Britton. Like this is a hard league to win. Uh, And so I'm looking forward to another season. Fantasy baseball is my favorite uh, fantasy sport by far. It's a ton of fun to like follow. Like if you like data and analytics and all that, like you don't even need to watch baseball to admire like scouting free agency and looking at stats and all that. So it's a ton of fun. Um, Wishing you the best this year,
Absolutely.
Frem, but I also hope that we can both make the playoffs.
Yeah, just a couple quick shout outs for our league mates. Your brother Matt Smith is notoriously always in the top five, always making the playoffs, always in the semis. I don't actually like his team this year. I look through and I see some holes on offense and pitching. I think there's something to be desired there. But I'm gonna just give Matt a call out. He is always good, so I am looking forward to seeing Matt grind a bit because I don't know if he hit on all the guys. Obviously, he has Shohei. Maybe Shohei will carry his entire team. Who knows? But I'm just really curious to see how he does because I don't think he has as many locks there offensively and defensively this year. So really curious. And then I do think that your cousin needs a bounce back. He's been in, kind of, bottom half of the league lately, which is not like him historically speaking. He has some studs offensively with Judge and Betts here, Alonso. Yeah, Valdez, Gilbert, Skeens pitching wise. So I'm really excited to see him bounce back. I think he's gonna make the playoffs this year and have a much better year. And yeah, I don't want to talk about it, but Justin Parker is always good at everything right now, and so yeah, looking at his team, I feel like he's still going to be pretty solid, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't give him any more bulletin board
I
material.
know, I know. I need to just stop there.
Yeah, and then obviously like David Diaz put together an amazing season last year. Kind of paid for it by not having early picks in the draft. So he'll be fun to see what he can do. And then there's just Hayden. Uh,
Oh,
Hayden
Hayden.
Hayden shows up to the draft and kills it, and then he just falls into the abyss.
Yeah,
So
we love you, Hayden. But I mean, it's interesting. He has the likes of Devers, Tatis, Acuna. I mean, there's no reason he shouldn't be competitive.
got a good team.
I think we just gotta coach him up. We just gotta remind him to set his lineup.
Right. I told him, set the alarm. This is advice to any fantasy player. I don't remember who gave me this advice. Maybe it was you. But someone said just set a daily alarm on your phone that just says set your fantasy baseball lineup. And I
Yeah,
do that every day. It like goes off at like 10 a.m. and I just set my lineup. It takes 2 seconds,
yeah.
but I just
It's a
needed
really
that
quick thing
that
to do.
reminder. So that's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely, good advice.
Last thing before we leave, we didn't talk about Ryan. Ryan, I feel like he had a pretty good draft too. He was hanging out with us. He's one that's due for a good year too. I know he puts in the time. So
Yeah.
uh,
Ryan and I had some friendly banter. I gave him a hard time about drafting Yankees every year. I hope he appreciates those comments. I think he has a solid team here. I mean, he obviously anchoring his team with Soto. I was definitely considering Christian Walker, Albies. He has the offense. Always curious what he does on pitching. I think maybe that's one of those areas, to look into more for him. But he has looks like some really good relievers here. Maybe, yeah, he's due. Definitely, if there's a guy who is due to have a good year, it would be him. Um, yeah, I put him and the cousin are definitely due for a good year.
for sure. It's been fun. I love talking fantasy baseball any chance we can get. I hope if you're listening, whether you're in this league or not, like hopefully you heard some names or you heard us talk about some guys that might be some good targets for you. Uh, Fantasy baseball, like I said, if you don't do it, it's a ton of fun. Totally worth your time. Get into a league with some people that also enjoy it. Um, that helps sort of build the good feelings of baseball. If you get in a league and everyone disengages, I could see why like you could lose um, any interest. But if you get into a competitive league, it's definitely enjoyable, especially when you throw in things like keepers and draft picks and all that. So, any final thoughts before we head out?
Oh man, just ready for baseball. First game is that the Cubs? First game?
Yeah, Cubs
Who's
Dodgers.
Cubs Dodgers? That's what I heard. Yeah, that'll be awesome. And that's happening in what country now?
I think it's in Japan.
Japan. There we go. Awesome.
And it's pretty cool because I'm pretty sure game one's going to be Yamamoto against Imanaga, which is it's pretty awesome.
That's pretty special stuff. Yeah, love that baseball's coming back. I know April's a little cold sometimes, but yeah, just love to get some counting stats back for us baseball nerds, and it should be a great time.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. This has been the Man Fantasy Baseball Fan, episode one. We love that. So check back for some more. We're going to do a lot more mini episodes on different topics throughout the year. So appreciate all of you and go Cubs and go Brewers.